Some games are played for fun. Some games are played to pass the time. But this game is played with your soul. They call it the midnight game. It's older than the town you live in, older than the church you pass every Sunday. It began as punishment, a ritual to keep the disobedient in line. The rules are simple: a candle, a piece of paper, a drop of your blood. But once you start, you are no longer alone. From 12:01 until 3:33 a.m., something will follow you. Something ancient. Something that wants you. And if your candle goes out, if the darkness swallows you, you'll learn the truth about what waits in the silence. Do you want to play the midnight game? Good evening. Tonight I want to tell you a story about a ritual that has been whispered about for centuries. A ritual so simple that anyone can perform it, but so dangerous that once you begin, you cannot undo it. They call it the midnight game. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was nothing more than another internet legend. One of those chain posts that get passed around forums, designed to scare people into sharing it. A creepypasta, nothing more. But I was wrong. And if you're listening, I hope you'll take this as a warning. Because what happened to me, what I invited into my home that night, is not something you can ever walk away from unchanged. It began with boredom. It was late one Friday night. I was scrolling through horror threads online, searching for something to kill the silence. That's when I found it. A post titled, "Do you dare play the midnight game?" The instructions were clear, written like a recipe. You need one piece of paper, one candle, one drop of blood, and salt. The post claimed it was an ancient pagan ritual, once used to punish those who disobeyed the gods. I laughed when I read that. Ancient punishments? In my suburban living room. It sounded ridiculous, but the more I read, the more curious I became. The rules said you had to write your name on a piece of paper, prick your finger, let the blood sink into the page. Then, at the stroke of midnight, place it at your front door, light the candle, and knock 22 times. On the final knock, you open the door, and the game begins. From 12:01 until 3:33 a.m., you are not alone. Something comes inside. Something that follows you in the dark. The post ended with a chilling warning. If your candle goes out, relight it immediately. If you fail, surround yourself with salt. It's the only thing that can protect you. I should have closed the browser. I should have gone to bed. But instead, I found myself collecting the items: a paper, a knife, a candle, a small box of matches, and an old salt shaker I grabbed from the back of my pantry. At the time, I told myself it was just for fun. Nothing would happen. I'd get a cheap thrill and a story to laugh about later. But deep down, I think part of me wanted it to be real. And that was the mistake. By the time the clock crept toward midnight, I had everything ready. The piece of paper sat on my kitchen table, my name scrawled across it in dark ink. A tiny bead of blood, smeared from the prick of a needle, stained the corner red. The candle was waiting too, a thick, half-melted pillar candle I dug out of an old box in my closet. It leaned slightly when I placed it in its holder, wax running in hardened rivers down the side. I glanced at my phone. 11:57 p.m. Something inside me twisted with excitement and unease. I told myself this was a joke, a dare I'd given myself. Just superstition, nothing more. But still, my hands shook as I picked up the candle and carried it to the front door. 11:59. The air felt heavy. The silence pressed against me. It was the kind of quiet that makes you strain your ears, desperate for any sound. But there was nothing. Not even the hum of the refrigerator. I crouched by the door, paper on the floor, candle lit, matches ready. My heart raced as the second hand on my watch ticked forward. Midnight. I raised my fist and knocked. Once, twice. My knuckles hit the wood in steady rhythm. 10, 15, 20. I counted each knock in my head, my voice trembling silently with the numbers. 21. And then 22. The sound echoed into the stillness. I turned the knob, just as the rules demanded, and opened the door. Cold air swept inside, sharp as knives against my skin. It wasn't the normal night breeze, it carried something else. A smell, faint but undeniable. Damp earth. Decay. I set the paper outside. My candle flame flickered dangerously, bowing in the wind. For a moment, I thought it would go out, but it steadied, holding strong. I closed the door. When the latch clicked shut, the silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore. I can't explain it better than this. You know that feeling when someone is standing behind you, even before you turn around? That's what filled the house. The air thickened. The shadows deepened. And though I was alone, I wasn't. The game had begun. I held the candle tightly, my eyes darting into every corner. The rules were clear. Keep moving. Never stay in one place too long. Keep the flame alive. So I walked through the hallway, into the kitchen, past the living room. The wooden floor groaned beneath my steps, louder than it ever had before. Every sound seemed amplified, like the house itself was awake. Minutes crawled by. 12:07, 12:14, 12:22. At first nothing happened. No voices, no whispers, no cold hands reaching for me. Just silence. But the silence was almost worse. My imagination ran wild, convinced that if I turned too quickly, I'd catch something standing just out of sight. The candle flickered. I froze, staring at the flame. My pulse hammered in my ears. Stay lit, stay lit. The flame straightened again, strong and tall. I exhaled in shaky relief, but then, from somewhere deep in the house, a sound. A creak, slow, deliberate, like footsteps, not mine. I stood perfectly still, listening. My throat tightened as the sound came again. Wood bending. A weight pressing down. Someone else was in the house, and that's when it truly sank in. I had opened the door. I had invited it inside. And now, it was here. The candle flame was my only companion. I held it in front of me like a talisman, watching how the shadows quivered and swayed along the walls of the hallway. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet felt amplified, as if the house itself was listening to me, or worse, something inside it was. The rules repeated in my head like a mantra. Keep moving. Never let the candle go out. Don't leave the house. Don't taunt him. Simple instructions. And yet, every step I took made me realize how fragile those rules really were. At first, nothing happened. The house was still, too still. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but suffocating. Like sound itself was afraid to exist here. Then, I heard it. A soft creak. Not from my own footsteps. From somewhere else. I froze, listening. The sound came again. A weight shifting against the old wooden floor. Slow and deliberate. From the far end of the hall. The candle in my hand flickered violently. "Stay lit. Stay lit," I whispered, shielding the flame with my palm. The air grew colder. My breath puffed white in the dark, and then I felt it. Not saw it, not heard it, felt it. A presence, heavy, pressing against me like a shadow that had weight. My skin prickled, hairs rising on the back of my neck. I forced myself to keep walking, moving into the living room. The candle flame sputtered, struggling like it was drowning. And that's when I saw it. On the far wall, in the space where the flickering light didn't reach. A silhouette. Tall, distorted, too thin. Its limbs stretched unnaturally, like a shadow cast by something that shouldn't exist. I blinked, and it was gone. The candle almost went out. I gasped and shielded it again, my hand shaking so badly I nearly burned my fingers. "Don't go out, don't go out." The flame steadied, just barely. But the silence was broken now. From the hallway behind me came the sound of running footsteps. Fast, heavy, charging toward me. I spun around, candle raised. Nothing. The hall was empty. The footsteps had stopped just inches behind me. I couldn't breathe. My chest ached with the effort of keeping quiet. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. And then, a whisper. So close it could have been pressed against my ear. "Keep playing." The voice was low, rasping, wet, like it came from lungs filled with water. I staggered forward, gripping the candle like my life depended on it, because it did. Every corner of the house seemed alive now. The wallpaper curled like peeling skin. The wooden beams groaned under invisible weight. The glass in the windows pulsed as if something outside was breathing against them. And always, just outside the halo of light, shadows twitched and shifted. I made it to the kitchen. The old clock on the wall ticked faintly, though I hadn't wound it. Tick, tick. I realized the sound wasn't coming from the clock. It was coming from inside the walls. 3 sharp taps. Then silence. 3 more. The rhythm was steady, deliberate, almost like a knock. I backed away slowly, trying to stay calm, but my pulse was hammering so loud I thought the Midnight Man could hear it. And then I saw it again. Not a silhouette this time, something worse. The candlelight stretched, bending the shadows unnaturally. And in that warping darkness, I caught a glimpse of eyes. Not human eyes. 2 pinpoints of pale, sickly light, staring at me from the floorboards, too low to be standing. As if something was crawling on all 4s. The flame flared bright, then dimmed, nearly extinguishing again. "No, no, no, no," I whispered frantically, cupping it. My heartbeat cinched with the flickers, every sputter of the flame feeling like my last. The eyes vanished. The ticking stopped. And then the entire house groaned, like every board, every nail, every wall was straining under some immense pressure. I stumbled back into the living room, desperate to put space between me and whatever was in the kitchen. That's when I noticed it. The photographs on the mantel. There had only been one before, a faded portrait of the house's original owner. Now, there were dozens. Every frame filled with pictures of me in the house. Me holding the candle. Me standing in the exact place I was standing right now. I dropped one in horror, the glass shattering at my feet. And in the reflection of the shards, I saw him. A tall, faceless figure standing directly behind me. I spun around. Empty air. The flame nearly died again from the rush of my movement, but by some miracle it clung on. That was when I realized the truth. The Midnight Man didn't just want me afraid. He wanted me to know he was always there. Just out of sight, just out of reach, waiting. The game had only just begun. The clock read 1:42, a mumble. I still had over 4 hours to survive. The thought crushed me like a weight. If the first hour had felt like an eternity, how could I endure the rest? The candle flame trembled, barely alive, and so did I. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to remind myself of the rules. Keep moving. Keep the flame lit. Don't give him an opening. But the house didn't feel like a house anymore. The air was wrong. Heavy, charged, like I was walking inside a thunderstorm. The shadows stretched and swayed unnaturally, curling toward me as if they were alive. The Midnight Man wasn't content with hiding anymore. He wanted me to feel him, and I did. Everywhere. A brush of cold across the back of my neck. The sensation of fingers just grazing my arm. A hot breath in my ear when I turned a corner. But when I spun around, nothing. Always nothing. I told myself it was in my head. A trick of fear. But deep down, I knew better. Because then came the whispers. They didn't sound like one voice. They sounded like hundreds. Men, women, children layered over each other, murmuring just beyond understanding. Words slipping through the cracks of sanity. Sometimes they called my name. Sometimes they laughed. And sometimes they screamed. The candle shook violently, and I stumbled down the hall, desperate to put distance between myself and them. That was when I saw the first hallucination. At least, I pray it was a hallucination. I turned the corner and froze. There, in the center of the living room, was my mother. Her face pale, her body stiff, her eyes wide open, but lifeless. She stood with her arms outstretched like she was waiting for me to embrace her. I couldn't move, couldn't think. "Mom?" My voice cracked. She twitched. Her head snapped violently to the side, bones popping in her neck. And then she smiled. Not my mother's smile. Too wide. Too sharp. Too wrong. The candle nearly went out as I staggered back. I forced myself to turn away, to run past her. But when I looked again, she was gone. The room was empty. Only the lingering echo of that smile burned in my mind. I realized then what the Midnight Man was doing. He was testing me. He wanted me to doubt reality, to stumble, to drop my candle, to break the rules. The game wasn't just survival, It was endurance. A slow war of attrition against my own sanity. I pressed on, moving from room to room. The whispers followed. The touches grew bolder. Sometimes I felt pressure on my chest, like hands trying to pin me down. Sometimes a cold grip tightened around my ankle, making me stumble. And then came the smell. Rot, decay. Like 1,000 dead things had been sealed in the walls. It grew stronger the further I went, until finally I reached the basement door. The stench was pouring from the cracks. My gut screamed at me not to open it. Every instinct begged me to turn back. But the rules were clear. If I stopped moving, if I stayed in one place too long, he would find me. So I opened the door. The darkness below was absolute. The candle's glow barely reached the first few steps. The smell was unbearable, gagging me, clawing into my throat, and beneath it, faintly, the sound of something wet. Drip. Drip. I forced myself down, one step at a time. The air grew colder, the dripping grew louder. Halfway down I froze, because I heard it, breathing, not mine. Slow, ragged, wet breaths echoing up from the bottom of the stairs. The candle wavered violently, like it wanted to die, and in that sickly light, I saw him. For the first time, truly saw him. The Midnight Man. Tall, skeletal, his body twisted like broken branches. His skin was the color of ash, stretched thin over jagged bones. And where his face should have been, only darkness, a void. 2 hollow pits where eyes should be, and yet I felt them burning into me. My knees buckled. I nearly dropped the candle. He didn't move, didn't rush me. He just stood there in the dark watching, waiting. And then, without a sound, he began to climb, one step, another, another. Each creak of the wood was like a gunshot in the silence. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping as I scrambled up the stairs. The candle sputtered wildly. At the top, I slammed the door shut, but I knew it didn't matter. Locks, doors, walls, none of it mattered. He was inside already, and I had 4 hours left. The door slammed shut behind me, but it felt pointless. He was here. The Midnight Man was no longer lurking in the shadows. He was hunting me openly. The house itself seemed to shift with him. Hallways stretched too long. Doors opened into rooms that didn't exist. Sometimes when I turned a corner, I saw myself, my own body, hanging from the ceiling, or lying dead on the floor with eyes wide open. And every time I blinked, it was gone. I kept walking, candle trembling in my grip. My arm ached from holding it so long that I didn't dare lower it. The whispers followed me relentlessly. You're going to die. He's already inside you. Burn the candle. Let him in. At times the voices weren't whispers. They were screams, violent, deafening shrieks that rattled my skull and made me stumble to my knees. And worse. Sometimes they sounded like people I loved. I heard my father's voice calling my name. My best friend, laughing the way he used to. Even my grandmother's gentle hum, the lullaby she used to sing when I was a child. But every time I answered, the voices twisted, mocked me, laughed at me, and always, beneath them all, I could hear him. The Midnight Man, not words, just breathing, steady, patient. Closer, I tried to keep moving, but my body was betraying me. Exhaustion dragged at my bones. My eyes burned. My knees threatened to give way. And then the candle went out. 1 second it was there, trembling weakly. The next gone. The darkness swallowed me whole. Cold slammed into my chest like a knife. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The rules. The rules. I fumbled desperately for the box of matches, my shaking hands slipping, dropping them, scattering them across the floor. I could hear him now, the wet, ragged breathing. Right behind me, closer. Closer. The matchbox slipped again, skidding across the wood. My heart nearly stopped. I scrambled blindly, nails clawing at the floor until finally I found it. With everything in me, I struck a match. The flame roared to life, and there he was. Inches away, his faceless void hovering just over mine. His body bent and twisted, pressing in close, closer than any human could stand. The heat of the match burned my fingers, but I didn't dare drop it. I lit the candle, and in that instant, he was gone. The room was empty. I collapsed, sobbing, clutching the candle like it was my only lifeline. Because it was. Time warped after that. Sometimes minutes felt like hours. Sometimes hours felt like seconds. My watch stopped working. The hands spun wildly, then froze, then spun again. I couldn't tell how long I'd been moving, only that every moment was agony. The hallucinations grew worse. I saw myself stabbed, burned, drowned over and over again. Different deaths played out before me in vivid detail. Each time, the pain felt real. Each time I screamed. Each time I looked down and saw myself unharmed. He was breaking me, piece by piece. And then, silence. Everything stopped. The whispers, the breathing. Even the shadows seemed to hold still. I knew that was worse than the noise. Because silence meant he was here. I turned slowly, and he was. Standing at the end of the hallway, taller than before, impossibly tall, his body scraping the ceiling. His arms stretched along the walls, claws digging into the wood. The void where his face should have been seemed to pulse, like a living thing. And then he spoke. Not whispers, not voices. But one voice, deep, hollow. You can't win. The candle wavered violently, as though it believed him. I ran. Through the hall, through doors that shouldn't exist, through rooms that dissolved the moment I left them. My legs burned. My chest felt like it was tearing apart. Still he followed, not fast, not frantic, but steady. Always steady. I don't remember how long I ran. I don't remember how many doors I opened, how many stairs I climbed, how many times I nearly dropped the candle, but I do remember the light. The first pale gray hint of dawn seeping through the cracks in the windows. The game was ending. I stumbled toward it. Every step agony, every breath a war. The whispers screamed behind me, furious, desperate. The walls shook, the floor split, but the light grew stronger. And then, silence. The candle flickered out. But this time, it didn't matter, because the sun was rising. The house was still. The shadows retreated. The voices stopped. The midnight game was over. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing, shaking, clutching at the boards beneath me, like they were the only real thing left. And for the first time in hours, maybe in forever, I felt alone. Truly alone. But the thing about the midnight game is, you only survive it once, because the Midnight Man never forgets. And now he knows me.